The next type of equation that we'll look at is what is called a quadratic equation. So let's begin with the definition. What is a quadratic equation? A quadratic equation is an equation that has as its highest power of x 2. So as you look at your equation, you should see a squared in the equation as the highest power of x. Remember that quadratic equations graph parabolas, which look like a U. So the format of a quadratic equation is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, and you're going to have numbers in place of the a, b, and c. For example, you might have 3x squared minus 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. So note that your a, b, and c can be positive numbers or negative numbers. It can be decimals or fractions, just as long as you have values to plug in for a, b, and c. Now the method that we're going to use in this particular section to solve a quadratic equation is factoring. There are other ways to solve quadratic equations that we'll get to later on this semester, but for now we're going to focus on factoring. So in order to factor a quadratic equation, you first want the equation set equal to 0, which has been done for us in this first example. X squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. So what we want to do in terms of factoring is we want to do the FOIL method in reverse. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my two sets of parentheses. And what you want to remember is that the F in FOIL stands for the first terms. So the values that you put here and here in the parentheses need to make the first term in the expression. So in terms of multiplication, the only way that you can make x squared is by multiplying an x times an x. So that part is actually pretty easy because you have no choices. It has to be x times x to make x squared. The L in the FOIL stands for last. So what you want to remember here is that the terms that you put in the last positions of the parentheses needs to multiply together to give you 9. So you want to think about how that can be done. We could multiply 1 times 9. We could also multiply 3 times 3. And you want to select a set of numbers that somehow will give you this middle term of 6. So you want to ask yourself, can I add or subtract 1 and 9 to make 6? And we know that we can't do that, so I'm going to go ahead and cross that one off. Can we add or subtract 3 and 3 to make 6? And yes, we know that we can add those two numbers together to make 6. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 3 and the 3 in those last positions. Now the only other thing that I need to consider is my signs. So if this 9 is going to be positive, then that means either we have a plus and a plus, because we know that a positive 3 and a positive 3 make 9, or the other option is that we would have a minus and a minus, because we know a negative 3 times a negative 3 makes a positive 9. Because I need this 6 in the middle to be a negative 6, I'm going to leave the negatives in instead of the positives. Now, once I get this thing factored, I want to check to be sure that I've actually factored it correctly. So I'm going to use my FOIL method really quickly and just make sure that I've got it right. So first times first is going to give me x squared. Remember, the O stands for outside. All right, so I'm going to be multiplying this x and that negative 3. So that's going to give me a negative 3x. The I stands for inside, so that's going to be these two terms. So that'll give me another negative 3x. And the L stands for last, so that's going to be the negative 3 times the negative 3, which is going to be a positive 9. I combine my middle terms, and I can see that I'm right back where I started with x squared minus 6x plus 9. So again, the only reason that I'm doing that is just to check my factoring to make sure that I've got it factored correctly. All right, so once it's factored correctly, then I'm going to take each of the two factors and set them equal to 0 and solve for x. Now, in this case, my factors are exactly the same, so I really only need to solve one of them. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, which gives me a solution of x is equal to 3. Okay, let's try another example. So this one says that we want to solve x squared is equal to 12 minus x. Now remember that we said in order to factor it, you want everything on one side of the equation. And it's easiest if you'll keep the x squared term positive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move the 12 to the other side by subtracting it off. So that's going to give me x squared minus 12 on the left and a negative x on the right. And then I'm going to add x to both sides. And so that gives me, and I'm going to put things in order, that gives me x squared plus x minus 12 is equal to 0. So now that everything is on one side of the equation, I'm going to go ahead and work on factoring it. So again, we know that first times first is going to make the x squared. And the only way to do that is x times x. Next, we're going to fill in the last two terms. Remember that your last two terms need to combine, multiply together to make 12. So let's think about how we can make 12. We can do 1 times 12. We can do 2 times 6. We can do 3 times 4. Look at your middle term. Your middle term has a coefficient of 1. So I need a set up here that will either add or subtract to make 1. So 3 and 4 look good because I know that I can subtract them and get 1. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in the 3 and the 4 for my last terms. Now let's think about the signs. This 12 needs to be negative, which means one of these terms needs to be positive and one of them needs to be negative. Okay? Because my middle term has a positive, then I'm going to make the bigger one positive and the smaller one negative. Now again, once you get this done and you think you have it factored correctly, FOIL it out and make sure that you do. So first times first is x squared. Outside terms makes a 4x, a positive 4x. Inside terms makes a negative 3x. Last terms make negative 12. Combine your middle terms, and you have x squared plus x minus 12, which is what you have over here, and that tells you that you factored it correctly. All right, again, once you have it factored, then you're going to set each term equal to 0 and solve for x. So adding 3 to both sides here gives me an answer of x is equal to 3. And then subtracting 4 from both sides here gives me a second answer of x is equal to -4. Our next example is a problem where the coefficient in front of the x squared is not 1. So when that happens, we know that the factoring is going to be a little bit more difficult than it was in the other two examples. Again, you need everything set equal to 0, which has been done here. And we're ready to factor. So let's look at our first terms first. We know that our first terms need to multiply together to give me 3x squared. The only way that I can multiply two numbers and make 3 is a 3 and a 1. And the only way I can make x squared is an x and an x. So that simplifies things a little bit in that that is the only possibility for making 3x squared. So now let's look at the last terms. So we're looking at this 15, and we want to think about ways that we can make two numbers multiply together to give you 15. So we can do 1 times 15. We can do 3 times 5. And at this point, it becomes a little bit of a trial and error type situation. So I'm going to pick a number. I'm going to go with the 3 and the 5, and I'm just going to plug it in and see what I get. All right, so what if I do the 3 here and the 5 here? Now, before I go any further, I'm going to check my middle terms. So I'm going to multiply these two together. That gives me 15x. And then I'm going to multiply these two together. That's my inside terms. That gives me 3x. And I'm going to ask myself, is that ever going to combine to give me 14? And the answer to that is no. So what that tells me is that I either have the wrong numbers in the blanks or I have them in the wrong order. I'm going to check the order first. So I'm going to switch the 3 and the 5, and I'm going to put 5 and 3. And again, I'm going to check my middle terms. So my outside terms, that's going to make 9x. My inside terms will make 5x. And I'm going to check against the 14 in the middle. So is there any way for this to add or subtract to make 14? And it does, so that tells me that I think I have my numbers in the right place. All right, so now all I need to do is add in my signs. All right, so I need the 15 to be positive, which means either both parentheses are positive or both parentheses are negative. Since we're shooting for a -14, I'm going to go ahead and put the minuses in both parentheses, and then I'm going to check. All right, so remember, once you have it factored and you think you have it right, do a quick check, FOIL it out. First times first, 3x squared. Outside, it's going to make a -9x. Inside is going to make a -5x. Last is going to make 3 times 5 is going to be 15. Combine those middle terms and make sure that that matches what you started with. That tells you that you have it factored correctly. Now you're ready to finish it up. So remember, the last step is to take each term and set it equal to 0. All right, we're going to solve these things for x. So I'm going to begin here by adding 5 to both sides. That's going to give me 3x is equal to 5. And then I will divide both sides by 3. So one answer is x is equal to 5/3. The other answer, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. This one's a little easier to work out, so x is equal to 3. So those are the two solutions to the problem, 5/3 and 3. All right, one final example. We have 5x squared minus 4x is equal to 9. Again, remember that it has to be set equal to 0 in order to factor. So I'm going to begin by subtracting 9 from both sides of the expression. So now I have 5x squared minus 4x minus 9 is equal to 0. When I look at my first terms, the only way to make 5x squared is going to be by multiplying a 5x times a 1x. So that part is fairly easy. Let's consider the 9 as the last term. So to make 9, I can multiply 1 times 9 or 3 times 3. And again, it's a little bit of a trial and error process here. You're going to pick a set of numbers. I'm going to go with the 3 and the 3. I'm going to plug them in, and I'm going to check to see whether that makes sense. So I'm checking my middle terms. So the outside, 5x times 3 is 15x. My inside, 3 times x is going to be 3x. Remember that you want it to make a 4x. So is there any way to add or subtract the 15 and the 3 to give you 4? And there's not, so I'm going to eliminate that. And I'm going to go to my other set of numbers. All right, so I'm going to try it by putting a 9 here and a 1 here. Let's check our outside and inside terms again. 5x times 1 is going to give me 5x. Inside terms, going to give me 9x. Can I add or subtract 5 and 9 to make 4? Yes, so we know now that we have the right numbers in the right spot. All right, let's nail down the positives and the negatives. This 9 needs to be negative. So what that tells me, because I know that this has to multiply together to give me a negative 9, it tells me that I'm going to have one positive and one negative in the two parentheses. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plug something in, and then let's check and see if it's right. If I'm wrong, I'll simply switch the negative and the positive. All right, remember that your check is by doing FOIL method very quickly to check and make sure that you have it set up right. So first times first, 5x squared. Outside is going to be a positive 5x. Inside is going to be a negative 9x. And last is going to be negative 9. We'll combine our middle terms and check and make sure that it's what we had before when we had it set equal to 0, which it is. So now we know that we have it factored correctly. The last step is to set each term equal to 0. So we're going to do 5x minus 9 is equal to 0. And we're going to do x plus 1 is equal to 0. So on the first one, we're going to add 9 to both sides. We're solving for x. So we have 5x is equal to 9. We're going to divide both sides by 5. And so x is equal to 9 over 5. On the second term, we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. And x is equal to negative 1. So our solutions to this quadratic equation are 9/5 and negative 1.